So the emissions have been greatly underreported, even though over the last 20 years ExxonMobil and others claim that their toxic releases are going down. But these aerial flyovers proved that the companies were fudging big time on their toxic chemical releases. And these are the cancer-causing agents like benzene, butadiene, formaldehyde, and others, compounds that cause birth defects, and chemicals that induce genetic changes, mutagens. So these plants emit a large quantity of highly toxic substances in order to make the gasoline, the jet fuel, the diesel fuel, and other products.
I'd like to offer one solution. I'd like to see our legislatures, our leaders, extend those laws that concern reckless endangerment of a child. They should not be laws that have an exception to the rule for industry. Those laws ought to include all people who recklessly endanger a child. And it ought to be of our concern that the legislators need to look into this. And that would make me very happy.
And I think one of the most important points that I want to bring out in this hearing is that the people living in these communities are suffering a daily regime of toxic chemical assaults. These toxic chemical assaults consist of a stew of different chemicals that I'm going to talk briefly about because it's based upon reports that have been submitted by ExxonMobil to the state of Texas, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency on an annual basis. But I think one of the most fundamental points that I want to bring out in this testimony is that basically the Federal Clean Air Act and even the Texas Clean Air Act, and it's incorporated in the Texas Health and Safety Code, it guarantees citizens in the state of Texas the right to clean air, and that is even in these industrial communities, which is what the agency likes to call them, but even these industrial communities and neighborhoods on the fence lines of these large refineries and chemical plants, they have a guarantee in the state and federal law of a right to clean air. Around the clock. Unfortunately, that right, they're not protected from that right because the State Commission on Environmental Quality does not enforce the law that it is supposed to carry out.
We need as much help as we can get from our state legislators to help change some of the laws. And if we could just get the Environmental Protection Agency to step up, as Neil Carmen said earlier, and do their job. This is a good starting point. Let's just start with enforcing the laws that are on the books. Let's just start with getting TCEQ to do their job. It's time for change, and the time is now.
Communities are affected by spills that the state or the federal government doesn't step up and give them information and leaves them out on their own to wonder what's going on. Should I evacuate? How is this going to affect my health? So it's definitely something that I plan to look into for next session in requiring the state to take a more active role. You know, we get a lot of pushback that they don't have the staff to go out and monitor, but this is something that's very important when there is a spill to have state staff out there to provide the information and give the community some guidance. And also looking in Reverend Malvo's and looking in our children, and that we do have plenty of studies that show a correlation, and think not that we're done with studies, but we need to work towards enforcing what we have in the books now.
Basically, we started out doing this ExxonMobil war boycott about 3.5 years ago. I worked with people in Dallas here. 2 years ago, we did a march to Crawford, and this year we're picking up on that same theme that's about Iraq, oil, and ExxonMobil. We also are picking up on a very important kind of inquiry into the health of people living in Beaumont and Baytown near ExxonMobil refineries on the Texas Gulf Coast. And yesterday there were hearings organized by the Dallas Peace Center, bringing people from the Texas Gulf Coast to talk about the health consequences of living next to the refineries, and moreover to talk about the failure of the state, federal, local governments in preventing the pollution that's destroying lives down there.
Go ahead.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Nick Modern. I'm Director of Consumers for Peace. We've been working on the ExxonMobil war boycott. And this morning I want to talk about two things. One is gasoline prices. The American public has been told many things about why gas prices are so high. But the thing that's been left out most often is the Iraq war. We've talked with a noted economist who suggests to us that out of every $100 that we put into our gas tanks and gasoline, $12.50 of that can be attributed to the Iraq war. That's because the war has stunted oil production in Iraq, and because the war is creating fear on the international oil market, fear that the war will spread into Iran or other countries and further disrupt oil shipments out of that region. Second point that I'd like to make is that ExxonMobil is in the spot right now of throwing fuel onto the fires in Iraq. ExxonMobil has been pushing to do long-term drilling contracts in Iraq. And these contracts are opposed by the Iraqi Oil Workers Union, by many other people in the society. When these long-term contracts are made with an occupied government, this war is going to intensify. ExxonMobil has the opportunity today, it has the opportunity to say we are not going into Iraq while it's occupied. They have the opportunity to say we want the occupation in Iraq to end. When those things happen, oil will tend to drift downward. ExxonMobil then can make an agreement with a legitimate government in Iraq rather than a government under occupation. This is like the Vichy government in France during World War II. What's happening right now is something that will have to only lead to more conflict and more bloodshed if this company goes in there and if the other major oil companies go in there.